Think back to when you were 7 or 8 years old, maybe sitting on the edge of your bed or staring out a car window, and you felt it for the first time. It was a quiet flicker of recognition that the script everyone else followed didn't match the one written inside of you. You didn't have a word for it back then, but you knew it was a secret that had to be protected at all costs. To survive, you did what Gen X girls were experts at, which meant you filed that feeling away and began the performance of a lifetime. This is the hidden psychology of growing up as a gay woman in a world that simply wasn't ready for you. We are going to look at the invisible cost of that camouflage, but more importantly, we will explore how that childhood survival strategy actually built the most powerful psychological strengths you possess today. If you have spent decades wondering why you are so good at reading rooms, but so tired of hiding, this is the reason why. Researchers consistently find that most people who identify as gay or bisexual report their first awareness of same-sex attraction around age 10 or 11. However, the sense of being different from other kids usually shows up much earlier than that, sometimes as young as 8, long before attraction even has a name. Before you understood what any of it meant, your body already knew something wasn't matching the script everyone else seemed to be reading from. For gay Gen X girls, that gap was doubled because there was no language for being gay, and there was also no language for being a girl who didn't want the things girls were supposed to want. You weren't waiting to be chosen by a boy, and you felt more like yourself in a pair of jeans than in anything your mother picked out for the school dance. The culture didn't just fail to see you, it actually didn't have a category for you at all. When lesbians showed up in the media, which didn't happen often, they were usually treated as a punchline or a threat. You might remember the dangerous predatory woman in a 90s thriller, or the sitcom character played for shock value for exactly one episode. The 1993 Vanity Fair lesbian chic cover gave you a split second of seeing something that looked almost like you, but then it got filed under a fashion trend and disappeared. None of it was a mirror that reflected your reality, and none of it told you that this was a real way to exist or that you were going to be fine. Picture yourself sitting in a health class in 1982 while the lesson covers puberty, attraction, and relationships. The other girls in the room are nodding along, maybe feeling embarrassed or bored, but they are following the script perfectly. Meanwhile, you are sitting there running a quiet calculation in the back of your mind because nothing in that lesson covers your life. Not one sentence applied to you, and when you have a feeling with no name, you don't go looking for answers. Instead, you go looking for camouflage. And for gay Gen X girls, that camouflage became a full-time job that started way before most people realize. More than 90% of the people watching this video right now are not subscribed. If you are starting to see that your camouflage wasn't a failure, but a brilliant survival strategy, then you have finally found the place where your experience is actually understood. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and share this with one person who needs to hear this. Now, let's continue. Once you realized you didn't have a mirror that reflected who you actually were, you started looking at everyone else instead. You began studying the girls around you with the same intensity you'd use to cram for a final exam that you were absolutely terrified of failing. Researchers use the term social camouflaging to describe this, which is a concept from neurodivergence studies that fits this experience perfectly. In clinical terms, it means you're consciously hiding your real self and mimicking the group so nobody notices you're different. In real life, it meant watching which girls got the most approval, figuring out what normal looked like from a distance, and then building a version of yourself that could pass for the real thing. Gay Gen X girls learned how to be feminine the same way an actor prepares for a major role. You didn't feel it from the inside out, so you had to learn it from the outside in, by observing, rehearsing, and eventually performing for an audience that never realized they were watching a show. While everyone was trying to fit in, the strategies usually fell into 3 different patterns. Some of you chose to become invisible by being the perfect student who never caused trouble or made a scene. You answered when the teacher called on you, but otherwise tried to take up as little physical space as possible, because safety came from being unremarkable. The logic was simple. If no one was looking at your face, no one could see the secrets you were trying to hide. Other girls took the exact opposite approach and performed high femininity like their lives depended on it, which, in many ways, felt true. You dated the right boys, laughed the loudest at every joke, and talked about crushes you didn't actually have with a level of enthusiasm you didn't feel. You figured that if you were loud enough about being exactly what society expected, nobody would ever think to look beneath the surface. Then there were the girls who just went inward by disappearing into books, music, and journals. You built a private world in your imagination that was rich enough to live in, and you stayed there because it was the only place where you didn't have to perform for anyone else. Most girls didn't just pick one of these roles, but instead moved between all three depending on the room they were in and who happened to be watching them that day. Psychologist Elon Meyer uses the minority stress framework to explain that this constant self-monitoring comes with a massive price tag. Running predictions on how people will react and editing your every move isn't just a little tiring. It's a heavy cognitive load that drains your mental battery in the background, like a power-hungry app. You never get that energy back to use for anything else in your life. Think back to a lunch table in 1985 when someone used the word gay as a punchline or a synonym for being weak and broken. You probably laughed along with everyone else because laughing meant you weren't the target. But that word still hit you every single time it was spoken. It didn't matter if it wasn't aimed at you specifically, because after years of hearing it, the weight of that word started to settle deep inside. This performance started long before you hit puberty or even had a name for what you were feeling. The psychological cost of keeping up that act every single day in your own house and school had to go somewhere. And eventually, that weight started to change how you saw the world. While a lot of that acting happened at school, the most intense psychological work took place at home, because that's where you first learned if love came with strings attached. Gen X girls were raised by boomer parents, or people from the end of the silent generation, who grew up in a world where being gay was officially labeled a mental disorder. The American Psychiatric Association didn't even remove that label from their manual until 1973, and even then, the vote only passed by a small margin. That kind of clinical stigma doesn't just disappear overnight. It's soaked into the culture and shaped how parents viewed any child who seemed like a problem. When a daughter didn't seem interested in boys or acted too attached to a female friend, many parents didn't try to understand it. They moved toward correction through a sharp comment, a disappointed look, or the way the energy in the room shifted the moment you walked in. During the 70s and 80s, the medical world often encouraged parents to fix girls who didn't fit the traditional mold of femininity. Doctors used the term gender identity disorder and told parents they could treat these girls to make them more feminine, leading some to spend years in therapy. Most of those women said later that the treatment didn't change who they were, but it did succeed in teaching them that their true selves were something that needed to be cured. This is where attachment theory helps us understand the damage, because the people raising you are supposed to be your safe base when the world gets too loud. When you realize those same people might stop loving you if they saw the real you, the entire system of trust breaks down. You don't stop needing your parents, but you do learn how to hide from them, and love starts to feel like a prize you win for performing correctly. Research shows that family reactions to gay children usually split into thirds. 1/3 accepted them, 1/3 rejected them, and the final third never knew because the child never told them. For Gen X girls, that last group was massive because staying silent wasn't a sign of paranoia. It was a smart calculation based on the world they saw around them. The things happening outside the house made that decision to stay quiet even easier to justify. Imagine sitting in your living room at 12 years old while the news was filled with terrifying stories about the AIDS crisis. You might not have understood the science of the virus, but you definitely understood the tone of voice the adults used and the look of disgust on their faces. You heard the link they were making between being gay and being dangerous, and you realized they were talking about people who deserved what happened to them. You sat perfectly still in that chair because you knew the thing they feared and hated was already living inside of you. Nobody had to look you in the eye and tell you that you were unlovable, because the culture did the math for you. You realized they loved the version of you they could see, but that love might vanish if the real version ever stepped into the light. You didn't reach that conclusion in one dramatic moment, but instead built it slowly from years of silence and the look on your father's face during the evening news. What did all those years of hiding and performing actually build inside you? Most people are surprised when they realize that staying quiet wasn't just a defensive move, because it actually forced you to develop a set of high-level skills that others simply don't have. When your emotional safety depends on reading a room accurately, you learn to read rooms with incredible precision. This isn't just some vague intuition you were born with, but rather a cognitive skill you sharpened through thousands of hours of repetition under pressure. Every single day you sat at that lunch table running social calculations, or adjusted your tone based on who just walked through the door, you were training your brain to catch details that most people completely miss. Psychologists often talk about hyper-vigilance as a stress response, which is true, but that constant state of alertness eventually produces high-resolution social perception. You developed the ability to catch a micro-expression before the person even finished forming it, and you can feel a shift in group energy before a single word is spoken. Because you started so young, you became a precise reader of people who can tell almost immediately if someone is being genuine or just putting on a show. Underneath that sharp perception sits a capacity for empathy that runs much deeper than what most people ever experience. You know exactly what it feels like to stand in a room where nobody truly sees you, and you understand the heavy weight of being liked for a version of yourself you invented just to make others comfortable. That knowledge stays with you, and in your adult life, it gives you the power to spot people who have learned to make themselves invisible so you can let them know they are seen. Many of you probably remember the first person who did that for you, like a teacher who wrote a note on your essay that recognized something real in your character rather than just correcting your grammar. Maybe it was an older cousin who refused to laugh at a joke when everyone else did, or an album you found that made you feel like someone else had lived your exact interior life. Research consistently shows that having just one supportive person can change the entire trajectory for LGBTQ youth. That person didn't have to fix the whole world for you. They just had to crack the story you were telling yourself about needing to stay hidden. When you have that one person, the wall you built around yourself stops being a solid barrier and starts to show its first signs of opening up. The massive gap between when Gen X girls knew they were gay and when they finally said it out loud, which happened around age 20 back then, compared to age 14 today, was never about being confused. You knew who you were, but the world around you made speaking that truth feel impossible for years. What lived in that gap wasn't just wasted time, but the slow construction of emotional intelligence that most people spend their entire lives trying to figure out. Growing up as a Gen X woman meant you had to protect a truth before you even had a name to call it. The camouflage you built to survive wasn't just a burden, but a training ground for the deep emotional strength you carry with you today. Over 50% of the people who started this video have already clicked away. But by staying until the end, you've shown that you value psychological truth over easy answers. That usually means you are ready to stop hiding and start using these survival skills as your greatest strengths. If you want to understand how this same hypervigilance still dictates your adult relationships, you should watch this next.